Welcome, Purchasing and Supply Chain Management Pros. I'm Omid Gamami, President of Purchasing Advantage and CEO of the Center for Purchasing and Supply Chain Management Excellence. Here we are again with another State of the Union for year-end 2015. We're into 2016 now, and I want to talk about the key things that I'd really like for you to do differently. So as I look at our profession, here's what we're doing well. We're doing a better and better job of attacking total cost savings and reducing total cost of ownership inside of our companies. We're getting some better recognition. However, the challenge that I see, and remember, for 23 years now in 19 countries, I've been going around the world working with different chief purchasing officers and the best in the business like yourselves, trying to make this profession a better place and trying to make us recognized as a strategic advantage inside our companies. What I'm seeing is we're focusing so much on driving down total costs and total cost of ownership, but the bullseye is off target. And so what do I mean by that? Let me kind of explain that. If you look at your standard goods company, you're talking about for every dollar of revenue generated, up to 82% of that is going straight back to cost. That's a gigantic proposition. And guess who's managing that? Of course, it's the purchasing department. Now, with your suppliers, you have a lot of these same exact things going on. They're no different. And so what that means is when you're going after suppliers to reduce down price and to reduce total cost, you're also, by definition, focusing on how do I compress their profit more? How do I get their profit margin down to a lower place? Now, that may not be your stated intent. You're probably not even thinking about that. But the reality is that's what your supplier hears. Because when you ask for a lower price, what they hear you say is, make less money, make less profit so I can record more cost savings. So I want to change our strategic direction. I want us to stop getting more and more sophisticated at hammering down price. And I want us to stop listening to some of the misinformation out there that I hear about our job in negotiations is to get an unfair advantage or to get the upper hand. And think about that for a second. Think about a supply chain that's predicated on each link trying to get an unfair advantage over the immediate link that's supplying it. Does that make any sense to you? It really doesn't. And so what I want you to do is to drive an approach that's more collaborative, that'll get you 10 times better results. So here's the deal. We have suppliers won't want to collaborate when we're focused on profit reduction strategies. Whether or not that's your stated intent, if that's what they think you're doing, they're not interested. They'll play only because they have to. However, if you go to suppliers and you're focused instead of on that 18% or whatever that profit margin is, and instead focused on the 82%, then you have someplace you can go. Let's talk about your end users first, though. Where does this have to start? And what is it I'm talking about? I'm talking about design for TCO. This is the pivotal thing that's going to make you from good to great and from great to outstanding as a purchasing and supply chain management professional. Design for TCO is so valuable. Hear me clearly. When you just focus on negotiations as your opportunity for cost savings, you've already left 80% of the money on the table. You will only on average achieve 20% of what's possible in negotiations. The other 80% is before you ever go to the negotiating table, and the vast majority of purchasing professionals don't see that at all. You need to get upstream end user engagement, and this is what I want our profession to start doing differently this year. Upstream end user engagement, but not for the reasons we've been telling each other so far. What have we been telling each other? We keep saying, well, we want to get upstream engagement so that we get the scope of work and the specification early before it goes to suppliers so we can influence who it goes through and we can negotiate better. That's good, but that was good in the 1980s. It's not good now. Why do you want to get upstream end user engagement? And by the way, by the time you've gotten the scope of work or specification, the bus has left the station. You have already missed that 80% cost savings. Hear me clearly. It's true. What you want to do is get way earlier than that with your end user, and then you want to focus on how do I drive design for TCO? And you drive that discussion by first saying to your end user, what are the performance metrics that you will use to measure the success of this purchase? Now, if they start saying things like compliance to specifications and on-time delivery and these kind of things we always hear, sure, those are important, but those are important for buying goods and services. I don't want our profession to buy goods and services. I want you to be buying performance results. And so when you buy performance results, that means you have a set of metrics. And remember, end users are the source of very little conflict and issue and pain for you when they want to buy goods and services. But they'll be the source of endless heartache when they don't like the results. Isn't that true? And so we have to shift the focus and start looking at results. And when we look at results and get those metrics that measure the results and not the goods and services, that your end user says these are exclusively the metrics I'll use to measure success, then you can work with them collaboratively to influence the design of their specification or scope of work. And we're going to use three-pronged approach to do that. The first one is we're going to look at reuse. And reuse is a super powerful concept. We're going to be looking at reuse of suppliers, reuse of standards, reuse of specifications, reuse of technologies, reuse of existing RFQs, reusing everything we can. Remember, innovation is not your friend in purchasing, not when it's coming from an end user, because 99% of the time that innovation is solving a problem much less well than an existing solution and at a greater cost and at a higher risk, because this innovated solution, which sounds wonderful, comes with risk. You don't know whether it's going to work or not, and you're shifting the burden from the supplier to you. Okay, so that's a huge problem. Reuse is a big one. The next one is simplification. You're going to look to see, where can I simplify this specification? Where can I simplify this scope of work? And what you're looking for is everything you can take away or simplify without impacting the end user's performance, the performance criteria or success metrics that they established. If you go through every single thing on the list that they want, and you can ask them and say, how will taking this line item away, how will getting rid of this bell and whistle impact your performance results? And force them to answer it in that way. How will it impact the performance results? There was somebody famous a few hundred years ago, French person, I think, who said a quote that I really like. And he said something along the lines of, perfection is not achieved when there's nothing else left to add, but rather when there's nothing else left to take away. This has a lot of significance in purchasing, and you need to be thinking about that when you're driving upstream design for TCO. Then the last thing you're going to look at is standardization. And with standardization, you're looking at how can we move everything from custom to standard, from the building block components all the way to the item that you're buying. How do we move towards standard? Standards are proven. They're there for a reason. And they're reduced risk solutions that come at a much lower cost and with better economies of scale. Look to standards and look to where you can shift. And once again, tell your end user, listen, I want to measure success the same way you do. You tell me, by moving from this custom component to the standard one, how that's going to impact your performance metrics, and explain to me exactly how that's going to impact it. I need to know. And if they can't explain it to you, that means it's okay to go standard and you're reducing the risk. And by the way, you should recognize your end users when they come on board with these strategies. I have achieved, and you're going to think I'm kidding you, but I'm not, because I have case studies to prove it with my fingerprints all over it. I have achieved up to 95% cost savings on major strategic deals just through driving upstream design for TCO. And on those same deals, if we didn't do that, the most we might have saved is 15% cost savings in negotiations. Peanuts compared to what was actually accomplished. And the last thing I'd like you to think about is harness your supplier innovation, because as long as you think that you're smarter than your suppliers, it's going to be the death of you as a purchasing professional. Accept now that your suppliers are smarter than you, because they're selling to many, many people who are trying to solve the same problems as you, and many who have successfully solved the same problems as you, and they've learned from all of those, including from the failures. And so many times we force them to do things a particular way that they know is adding cost, and they're pulling out their hair because they want to be a trusted advisor to you. But instead, you're telling them failure to do it in this exact way shall result in being disqualified from the bid. That's not a good way to do business, folks. We want to harness supplier innovation. I promise you, if you come to them with your problems and say, these are the supplier performance metrics and the purchase performance metrics my end user has identified, help me reduce my total cost while not impacting these metrics, then you have collaboratively suppliers on your side, because you're no longer talking about how to have them make less money so you can report more savings. Now you're talking about taking costs out of the supply chain and taking costs out of the purchase, which benefits them as well, and it makes them more competitive in their industry. So chief purchasing officers, I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you, and I want you to do these things. I want you to drive your organizations to take costs out of the purchase and drive upstream design for TCO. And if you do this one thing, as purchasing professionals and supply chain management professionals, you will become the rock star in your department, because I know firsthand it's not happening today, not enough and not good enough. And as CPOs and chief purchasing officers, use this strategy and take the accountability that I want you to have to make our profession relevant, to make us be recognized as a value-added center of profit inside the company, and have us get a seat at the table with the executive staff. Because if we don't have a seat at the table, then we're going to be on the menu for lunch, and that is not acceptable in our profession. By the way, before I close out, I want to remind all of you that I've launched the world's best and most sophisticated purchasing and supply chain management certification program. It's 100% online. You can check it out at www.centerforpscmexcellence.org. Until next time, I'm challenging all of you to be your best.